Novak Djokovic had an incredible run at the Wimbledon Championships, no doubt about it. But it looks like he won't be able to follow up on this momentum anytime soon. And if you know much about him, you already know why. Why won't the superstar player be at the US Open? Are there any other players in the same situation? What else is going on in the world of tennis? You'll find out in today's video if you stick around to the end. So let's get going. Before anything else, just how did Djokovic fare at the prestigious Wimbledon tourney? Well, it was a historical run for him, no question there. As you'd expect, he mowed through the first several rounds of the tournament, without ever being in too much danger of elimination. But that changed as soon as he reached the quarterfinals, where the Italian Jannik Sinner gave him quite a scare. The 10th seed gave number 1 all he could handle, as he took the first 2 sets straight. That put Djokovic in an unenviable spot, where he had to win 3 straight in retaliation, as dropping just 1 more could cost him his tournament life. Stunningly though, he did managed to rally, and in fact won the last 3 sets quite handedly, perhaps outlasting Jannik in the end. Similarly, he dropped his first set to Cameron Norrie in the semifinals, only to take the remaining 3 sets in decisive fashion. From there, Djokovic no doubt had hoped to get a rematch with Rafael Nadal, who had recently defeated him at the French Open in a lengthy battle just a couple of weeks prior. Sadly though, Nadal won his quarterfinal match against Taylor Fritz. He aggravated an abdominal injury in doing so and ended up having to relinquish his spot in the semis, thereby giving Australian Nick Kyrgios a bye to the last match. By these admittedly dubious circumstances, Kyrgios managed to become the first unseeded competitor to make it to the finals of a major since Jo-Wilfried Tsonga at the 2008 Australian Open. And while he did no doubt benefit from Nadal's injury, he did manage some big upsets on the way there, including defeating the 4th-seeded Stefanos Tsitsipas. My word, some of the names in this sport. Kyrgios was by far the fresher man going into the grand final as a result, but Djokovic kept up the trend, dropping the first set only to take the last 3 straight. Albeit this time the final set was a real nail-biter, but it seems nothing was going to stop Djokovic from winning his incredible 4th consecutive Wimbledon championship. All that is the good news, but now for the bad news that shortly followed. Why is he exempt from the US Open now? Well, if you've been keeping up with Djokovic throughout the last few years, the answer to this probably won't surprise you, though it's likely a bit disappointing. He's currently barred from the US Open for the same reason that he was barred from the Australian Open earlier this year. Novak Djokovic simply refuses to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Novak is a believer in natural recovery, noting in 2018 that he, quote, cried for 3 days out of guilt after an elbow surgery because he wasn't fond of surgeries or medications, and wanted to be as natural as possible. Taking this to the logical extreme, I suppose, led to him not wanting to take either of the COVID vaccines. And that's not something that the governments around the world are too happy about when it pertains to someone who would otherwise be traveling internationally as frequently as a top-level tennis player would be. He made headlines in January of 2022 when he was actually detained trying to come into Australia, as the Australian Border Force determined that he didn't meet the requirements for unvaccinated visitors. Months earlier, the Victorian government actually did give him a medical exemption from their otherwise mandatory vaccination standard for players at the Aussie Open, seemingly granted due to him testing positive for the infamous virus in September. This has to do with the general belief that once a disease is cured, you're safe from getting it again for a while, and have perhaps developed some immunity. Although there's honestly a lot of reason to dispute that, which is probably why this exemption ultimately didn't hold up. Now he is similarly being denied entry into the US. While the US Open doesn't have a mandate for this, the United States government doesn't allow any non-US citizens into the country without a vaccination. So it goes that the number 1 player in the world is going to be missing the US Open for the first time since 2005. Unless, of course, he gets the jab, which he's made clear is not happening. Are there any other players like him in this kind of situation? Indeed there are, although they are very few, at least on this level. Amidst the very loud drama surrounding the Australian Open, the ATP put forth a statement about the situation, and during which they noted that 97% of the top 100 players had been vaccinated, a number that later rose to 98. It's believed that Novak Djokovic is one of the only 3 such players with this status, 2 men's players and 1 from the women's side. This is notably a major departure from just a few months prior, where CNN was reporting that as many as 30% of the top 100 were unvaccinated. While the unjabbed female player is unknown, Tennys Sandgren revealed himself to be the other man in this equation. Now, let's all just take a moment to laugh at the fact fact that there's a professional tennis player out there who is literally named Tennis. Just gonna give you a bit there. Alright, we good? Got it out of our systems? Then let's continue. Tennis, like the sport, was at one point seemingly a bit resentful about Novak getting the medical exemption. He noted on social media that it wasn't going to happen for him as he didn't have quite the same level of stroke as the legendary Serbian. However, he did come to his defense, as did many others in his position, when Djokovic was being held up at the border in Australia. Of course, the shoe is on the other foot now, since tennis. Seriously, what are the odds? Mr. Sandgren is an American-born player, and so he should have no issue playing at the US Open. Well, what are the other big tennis-related stories going on right now? Well, you might have heard about the US Open coming up. Yes, that's a joke. We've of course mentioned that many times by now. But you know who's going to be there? None other than Serena Williams. While she didn't last long in Wimbledon, or, well, she didn't make it past the first round at least, but it was a very long first round for her and her opponent Harmony Tan. She will be making a comeback at the US Open after missing last year, and she'll be doing so with a black plaster upon her cheek. What is that? Why is that? Well, we've actually got a video on just that subject, and it may already be published by the time you see this one. So be sure to check it out and/or be on the lookout for when that releases. Similarly, we've got a video on deck about Australian tennis star Lleyton Hewitt, who was recently enshrined into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Hear all about his career and what the induction means to him. Did you know that he was the youngest man to ever win an ATP tournament? And he was also the youngest— oh wait, sorry about that, almost spoiled the video. His story is really quite fascinating, so be sure to check it out. Well, with that said, I guess we can't put off this last question any longer. Is it right that these COVID restrictions are being placed on Novak Djokovic? Well, it feels like our feet are going to be put to the fire no matter what we say on this, doesn't it? Well, in the interest of keeping ourselves from being wholly torched, I'll simply say this. The fact that even the top player in the world is being held to the same standard as everyone else sends a strong message. And seeing as by now he's well aware of how serious the ramifications are for his actions, or rather his lack of action, Novak certainly should have seen this coming. And to be blunt, you can't expect the world's laws to be bent for you, just because you're some superstar. So regardless of how you feel, it's hard to really call any of this injustice. And gosh, you know, we'd love to talk more about this subject, but what do you know? We just so happen to be fresh out of time. Oh well. Yep, that's the end of the video. Just hit it. What can you do? So how do you feel about Novak Djokovic, both as a player and as a person? Does he need to just cave and get the vaccine already? We're sure this won't cause any sort of ruckus in the comments whatsoever. Oh dear, this one's gonna be messy. But at the same time, be sure to tell us what you think, and until next time, thanks for watching.